Hey everybody, welcome into the back room. I'm Andy Ostroy. We have Emily Suttle-Braun with us today. She dated Graham Platner, and she wrote an op-ed about that in Newsweek this week. We'll talk to Emily in just a moment, but first, thanks for tuning in. We appreciate you listening, and we'd love to hear your comments. So email us at backroomandy@gmail.com and or post on our social media, and we'll read some feedback next time. And if you like the podcast, please rate and review and follow or subscribe, and you'll be notified every time we post a new episode. So Emily Suttle-Braun is the founder and CEO of Doodle Strategies, a growth and sales partner for political tech companies, agencies, and data platforms. She has over 15 years of experience in campaigns, advocacy, and political tech, highlighted by her work on the 2016 Hillary Clinton and 2020 Biden-Harris campaigns. And she wrote a terrific op-ed that appeared in Newsweek yesterday titled, I Dated Graham Platner. I Believe Jenny Racicot and Lindsey Fifield. And she's here to share her story. Emily, welcome into the back room.
Thank you for having me.
So we'll talk in a moment about your terrific op-ed, which appeared in Newsweek yesterday, titled, I Dated Graham Platner. I Believe Jenny Racicot and Lindsey Fifield. But first, I want to get your thoughts on the big breaking news last night. Platner's 11-minute video he released where he announced he's quitting the campaign. Your takeaways from that?
I was stunned by that video. And I don't think that enough folks are talking about how stunning it was. I suspect that he railed against any advice that he was given in filming and posting that. I think the anger and the palpable rage that you could feel coming through was kind of disturbing, if I'm being honest. And I think it had the opposite effect that he intended. I think it made him look pretty guilty.
Yeah. I found the whole thing incredibly performative. I agree. I thought he was arrogant. I thought he was angry, dismissive, defiant. He played the victim card, took no responsibility, and blamed the political structure and the Democratic establishment, everyone else besides himself. Kind of sounds like someone else we know who's in politics, doesn't it? Is this the new norm? The gaslighting, fake news, everybody's lying, poor me?
I fear that it has become the new norm. I think we're living in a post-Trump political era where getting down in the dirt and mudslinging has become popular. I don't think that's how we win elections. I don't think that's how we recapture the electorate. Certainly, I don't think it's what voters, especially in swing states, want to see. I think that the parallel that you're drawing between Trump, unfortunately, is a keen one. Frankly, I think that the Graham Platners of the world, the Bernie Sanders of the world, need to take a seat now. I think Bernie Sanders needs to stop being kingmaker here and recognize that there is a deeply entrenched and institutionalized misogyny, in our society in general, but certainly in politics and in progressive politics. And that's why I decided to write this piece. I've written some variation of the piece over the years, and I'm pleased that it's come to light now. But this is a much deeper problem than just Graham Platner.
The fact that he's a progressive is something that I found most shocking, because when I watched that video, I didn't feel like I was watching a progressive. I felt like I was watching someone in MAGA.
It had a conspiratorial tone to it. Is that a word, conspiratorial?
Mm-hmm.
That also made me pretty uncomfortable. I think to your point, there was a lot of othering. There was a huge amount of blame and deflection, but the whole, the institution is out to get me, and I believe at one point he said they would rather Susan Collins win than me, is so delusional and arrogant and disappointing, that I think we're just pleased to see that he's dropped out of the race.
Yeah, it wasn't a good look. And I think if you take a step back and you watch that video, it's like when I see Donald Trump lash out at a female reporter, the way he does with his anger and venom and rage, how hard is it to take the leap from that to him being alone in a hotel room with a woman who says no, right? That was my big takeaway from last night, was watching that video and go, huh, this is a guy who might be guilty of what he's accused of, because I'm seeing maybe his true character right here. Like, he's not accepting reality. He's not happy because he didn't get what he wanted, even though he's the only reason his campaign ended. His behavior, nobody else's, not the establishment, not the political system. And it was not a good look for him. And I think it did not help his cause. He could have taken the high road. He could have just in 2 minutes said, I'm not guilty of any of this, but I have to drop out because I don't want to disappoint voters and I don't want to have this get in the middle of a very important election. Thank you very much. Goodbye. Good night, everybody. Don't forget to tip your waiters on the way out, like that kind of thing. Instead, it was this long, rambling, like you start to imagine, what was it like being a woman, being alone with him? Is this the guy that Lindsey saw? Is this the guy that Jenny saw? Well, certainly certainly seems likely. Before we actually get to your op-ed in a moment, which I promise I will, I think it's important and it would be interesting for you to take a quick moment and just tell us about your background, what you currently do, and what your involvement has been over the years in the political arena.
Yeah, I've been involved in progressive politics my whole adult life. My first job out of college, so while I was in college, was as a street canvasser for Hillary Clinton in '08. I worked on the HFA campaign in 2016 as a volunteer coordinator. And it wasn't until 2020 that I got professionally involved in Democratic politics. 2020, obviously, there was a pandemic going on, and I went to work on Biden campaign. And that was a life-changing experience for me, working on a campaign during a global pandemic. There's nothing like that. And, the day of the election, we all no longer had jobs. And then you were into that full week stretch of who's going to win. We had that red mirage. And then Biden obviously won. And then I was living on the Hill, and on January 6th, had a front row seat to what happened in my neighborhood at the Capitol. And that was obviously very disturbing and very inspirational to me as a strategist. I actually have worked a lot in Democratic tech. So if you have ever made a contribution to a Democratic campaign, if you're familiar with Act Blue, if you have ever volunteered as a canvasser, you probably have used a tool or a tech that I work with in some capacity. So today, I run a firm called Doodle Strategies. The name is a bit quirky. I have two Doodle dogs, but we are a growth and a business development firm for Democratic tech and Democratic services. So we're extra behind the scenes in getting Democrats elected, but it's really fun work.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you for sharing that with us. So let's talk about the op-ed. Sure. Tell us about it. Take us back to when you dated Graham Platner, your experience with him, and what compelled you to write this piece and write it now.
Yeah. So this was over a decade ago that we dated. Met online, I believe it was Tinder. Both were in our 20s. I think we're the same age. I'm 37 now. We were both in our 20s. And the DC mid-20s scene, if you're not familiar, is a lot of drinking, a lot of going out, a lot of working out. I worked at the gym that he worked out at, and saw each other a lot at this gym. And it was very casual. I want to be clear that I was not in a committed relationship with this person. It was very short-lived. It's been well over a decade since I spoke to him until he announced when we got back in touch. But it was pretty unremarkable. He was a kind, pretty mild, nice young lad at the time. You could tell kind of a player and, not really interested in anything super serious. We did a lot of drinking. We did, a lot of hooking up. It was very casual and unremarkable. So when when he announced that he was running, I was actually in bed with my husband, like watching the news, and shot up and was like, I used to date this person, and went to my phone, and he was still in my phone, and texted him, and he responded immediately, and um, caught up, and had both since gotten married. And I had been through 3+ years of IVF to get pregnant, and him and his wife were going through IVF. So we were able to kind of commiserate on that. I was like pleasantly surprised at how much he was interested in engaging with me, especially as like a political strategist. I suggested that I put him in touch with some folks that really could help him with his campaign. And then we've kind of like been in touch a little bit via text since then, but not in a larger capacity. I think it's worth noting that we did have a sexual relationship, and at no point in the last year plus has he chosen to be inappropriate with me.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, the bar is in hell, but um, I think that's worth noting. And so, these first allegations that came out, the stuff about the Nazi tattoo, the stuff about the Reddit stuff, was obviously alarming. Frankly, I think was explained away for a number of different reasons. I think that we are living in this post-Trump era where politics has changed fundamentally as a game, and Democrats have been scrambling to figure out how to play that game. I don't think we played it very well here by swooping into Maine with outside consultants and choosing a candidate that was this deeply flawed. But so dated very, very briefly. And then, when these latest allegations came out, I just said, enough's enough. I'm going to come forward. I will say I have written some variation of this piece for years. And I have
About him?
Not about him, about sexual assault, harassment, misogyny, and sexism in the political space, in the political tech space, in the community, and just like the country at large.
Which you have experienced personally?
I have experienced personally on more than one occasion. And, I'm very ununique in that regard. Yes. I happen to be very honest about it.
Was it the kind of situation where you came forward to the authorities with this kind of thing, or to your employers? Or was it just like a lot of women, you were like, they're not going to believe me, and I'm just not, it's not worth it?
So I don't mind being transparent about the fact that in my life, I've had 3 separate occasions. One in college when I was drugged and pretty violently raped. I went to the hospital the next morning because I was in physically very rough shape. This was a school in North Carolina. I remember being told at the time, well, you were drinking and you drink a lot. I remember being told to think about what this will do to his life if you press charges. I remember being told that I could not have a proper rape kit done in the hospital if I didn't press charges, and also being told at the same time that pressing charges was very serious. And the message to me at 19 was very clear: whose futures are worth protecting in this world. So ultimately did not press charges, and that was extremely disruptive to my formative years. I ended up leaving that school. I ended up deeply sick with an eating disorder and all sorts of depression. And in my 20s, met a man who was significantly older than me and probably didn't have the wherewithal to sense the predatorial nature of this relationship. And I ended up in an on again, off again 10-year relationship with someone who deteriorated into alcoholism. And so I know that blank stare that Jenny Racicot describes. I know what it's like to be physically intimate with someone and have that shift very quickly into a frightening situation. And that was a relationship that took me some time and a great amount of trauma to get out of. I'm very lucky that I have now met and am married to a very special and gentle man who I don't think is capable of these things. Although I would say that I think men are capable of pretty much anything. And then as I stated in the piece, in 2024, I was working for a progressive tech company where I was being sexually harassed daily, in the office, in front of my boss, in front of the CEO of the company. I brought it to light and was basically told, well, tell him to buzz off, tell him to, get off or whatever. And ultimately, I ended up leaving that company because I just felt like the culture was not representative of my values or the values that they were putting out to the world. And I went to another company that was completely non-competitive by nature and was very quickly served legal notice by the company where I was being sexually harassed. And luckily, I had documented all the harassment and I was able to provide that to their lawyers, and they very quickly dropped this legal action. But once again, the message was clear to me. We may be a progressive company that spells out our progressive values on the office wall, but it does not extend to you as a woman. And it certainly does not extend to you as a woman being able to use your voice for good.
I'm so sorry you had to experience that. Those stories that you just shared are all too prevalent in our society today, which makes this Graham Platner situation all that more important. Knowing what you know now about his alleged behavior, and as you just described, I mean, rape is a horrible, violent, traumatic crime. And also remembering how he was with you, do you find yourself just perplexed at how that kind, good, decent, fun guy you spent time with in your 20s could be capable of what he's accused of?
Sadly, no. I think, like, yes, I could not conceptualize of the person that I dated doing these things, certainly not to me.
Mm-hmm.
But I have been in a relationship with someone who went from in a decade, which by the way is the time span from when
Right.
we were together to now, um, capable of these things. And I think when you introduce a healthy dose of PTSD and alcohol into the mix, and you combine that with just like natural male dominance and power, that, as I said, I think men are capable of anything. And I was getting ready last night to go to the News Nation studio for an interview about this when
Mm-hmm.
the video that he released dropped. And I said to my husband, God, am I doing the right thing here? Like, he seems devastated. Like, I felt this like real sense of guilt. And then he proceeded with that video, and I thought, holy shit, like, no, this person is capable of doing this. And that's devastating.
Mm. You know, I really appreciate you coming forward the way you have, because yours is a very important perspective, in my opinion, because all too often there are women who take the opposite position and come forward, whether it's friends, coworkers, whatever, and they say about an accused abuser that they believe him because he never did anything to me.
Mhm.
As if an abuser or a rapist abuses and rapes every woman he encounters. So it's a really preposterous position to take, and it's not helpful to women. And I think what you have done by saying, he was this way with me, he was a great guy, nice guy, fun guy, but I believe Jenny and I believe Lindsey. That's a really important position to take.
Thank you. And I agree. I would be remiss if I didn't admit that when Lindsey Fifield's accusations came out in the New York Times, I was immediately approaching them with skepticism.
Mm-hmm.
The timing was very interesting. The fact that she's a conservative strategist was obviously very confusing. But I really stand by the fact that women are to be believed. And I think that there's all sorts of parallels to be drawn when it comes to women and believing them and allowing them to make choices, right? Like, we've watched reproductive rights in this country get rolled back by decades. And that speaks to how we treat women in this country, which is you are not to be trusted to make decisions about your own body. You're not to be trusted to be honest about your experiences. And I think that is a very frightening road to go down, and certainly not one that I would have anticipated even 10 years ago.
This whole Platner thing is very complicated for several reasons because there's so many moving parts to it. Like you, I also was at a place of, okay, I'm not a combat veteran. I wasn't, in my early 20s or whatever, and serving several tours of duty. Okay, so he got drunk, did something stupid, got a tattoo, which certainly looks like a symbol that was used by Nazis. But if you go look up skull and bones, there's also several other definitions for how and where that's used. So I was like, okay, he was young and stupid. The
Yeah.
sexting, that's between him and his wife. Lindsey's initial claims, which I don't believe were on camera, and it was just about him being rough with her, pulling her arm, and because she was a Republican strategist, and because we're headed towards the most critical election in history where we know the president on down is trying everything possible to steal it. We see AI videos that are fake with James Tallarico in Texas dressed as a woman. Like, you say to yourself, it's not quite enough, and this election is so important. It just means that we don't live in a black and white world, especially now when it comes to politics and the future of our country. But this week was a game changer for a lot of people. Is it just because we saw two human faces, two people being very credible, sitting with Jake Tapper, telling their stories, and finding it incredibly hard not to believe them, and therefore saying to yourself, I can't, I'm done. And that was even like Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders, people who literally were so aggressively supporting him up until now.
Yeah, I think it's impossible to look at this in a vacuum for all the reasons that you just described. I do think that, rape is the worst thing that you can do to a person. And so obviously those allegations are really serious and cannot be explained away the same way that a tattoo can be, or unfortunately dismissing someone because they come from the other side of the aisle. I think that there's clearly a desperation amongst Democrats in the country for candidates that not only represent them and progressive values, but are also going to break through and get stuff done. Like, look at what Mamdani has been able to do in New York. I think that people are really, and I said this in the piece, like desperate for a Mamdani wherever they live in Maine. And in many ways, on paper, Graham Platner was that. And I think it's really important to remember that what Platner represented is a movement. And yes, that movement was tied to him as a man and as a candidate. But even with him stepping aside, that movement doesn't have to go away. He said himself in that video, like, we were advocating for healthcare. We were advocating for genocide to be properly addressed and taken seriously. And that doesn't go away just because of one flawed candidate. But I do think that we as Democrats draw a line in the sand when it comes to sexual assault, or certainly we have to. And that's what you're seeing play out here. I think there's also a lot of I told you so going on here. I think there are a lot of female strategists. There were a lot of obviously women that were interviewed by this New York Times piece, who were just sort of now hands up in the air, like, is this really what it took to get you to believe this? And I'm feeling that way a little bit. Like, what was I thinking? And I'm happy to admit that, like, I have a personal relationship with this person, not a very close one, but I did. So sort of for me, it was like, you do want to see someone that ascending to political office. How cool would it be if someone that I dated and liked was to become a U.S. senator? But we don't do that by compromising our values, and we don't do that by silencing women, and we certainly don't do that by pretending that these things haven't happened when they so clearly have.
There certainly is a lot of Monday morning quarterbacking taking place, but hindsight is a luxury. So if we go back a month and a half, and play it out all over again and say, okay, he was young and stupid, got a tattoo, he was sexting. I mean, my God, 50% of all marriages end in divorce because one or both in the couple do something stupid, usually cheat. And then, Lindsey, it's hard to accept not believing her, but the story wasn't the story that came out this week, and it wasn't Jenny's story. And so I'm not excusing those who didn't believe her then, but unfortunately, we are living in such a toxic partisan landscape right now. And this election is very important. And there are people in Washington, you can look at Ken Paxton, who's running in Texas. I don't think it was wrong for some folks to sit back and go, look at what they're doing. Look at who they're putting up. Who knows whether he knew it was a Nazi tattoo or not. He says he did. Okay, let's cut him some slack, whatever. It was easy back then to take these three-ish things and just say, let's give the guy a shot. We believe in redemption. The sexting, he seems to have worked it out with his wife. She stands behind him. Now, of course, we jump ahead to today, and you get the Monday morning quarterback. Why didn't we believe her then? And perhaps we should have. But life is full of nuance. It's full of gray matter. And like you say, you can't operate in a vacuum. And certainly, I think this is a classic case of, like, what do you do? What do you do? Do you just believe every single thing? I mean, would it be so crazy to think that somebody put up somebody to take a Democrat down who looks like he could beat Susan Collins and we could take over the Senate? Not in today's landscape. Totally possible. So, but here we are. And I think what you said before is the right thing, and that is he's gone. The right thing happened. People came forward, told their stories, and I think that's ultimately what's important. The right thing happened in the end. These things tend to work themselves out, at least on our side, the right way, because there is a different moral center that I think Democrats ultimately have.
Yeah, I think that's right. The only pushback I would have is just, we are very willing to cannibalize our own and kind of quick to I think about Al Franken all the time and what a great politician he was, and how quick we were to cancel him. I think that there were three real things at play here. The first is that out of desperation to find the sort of style candidate that Platner was, you had outside consultants coming into Maine and hand picking him. And not doing their due diligence, right? Like the amount that came out in what was really a short span of time as someone that works in politics is pretty embarrassing for folks that are responsible for doing that research. Obviously the only person here to blame is him for both taking advantage of women and not telling the truth. But there were multiple times that he was asked, like, is there anything else that's going to come out?
Right.
And he said no. And so it's very hard now to look back on that and ask, did you know about, like, do you even remember that this happened? Because I wouldn't be shocked if he doesn't, and therefore couldn't conceptualize of it coming forward. But so that's.
I think Jenny even said in her interview that he was drunk, and she kind of brought it up the next morning, and he had no, she said, do you remember last night? And he was completely oblivious.
Right, exactly.
Doesn't excuse it, but
no.
To your point.
The second piece to this that I do not think gets talked about enough is the Bernie Sanders of it all, and the way that people are infatuated with Bernie Sanders, almost to a Trump level. And are blinded to, frankly, his sexism and his misogyny, the deeply vitriolic campaign that was run against Hillary Clinton in 2016. Go and watch an interview with Bernie Sanders and Caitlin Collins on CNN. Watch the way that he treats her, and tell me that candidates like Platner, who look up to Bernie Sanders, are not going to be told that it's okay to treat women like that. So there's a power balance here that makes me really uncomfortable. And then, I think this comes down to holding the right accountable for their candidates. And that obviously goes all the way up to the White House for a president that's had 28 plus sexual assault allegations against him, one of which he was held civilly liable for. But it's very difficult as a Democrat who is desperate to win in a state like Maine, that is such a crucial state to take in order to win the Senate, to wrap your head around that comparison, right? Like, and false equivalencies are the devil's playground. But to know that Trump is in office and Paxton is running for office, and then have to hold your own candidates accountable is a very weird line to walk.
Yeah, especially when you hear Kevin McCarthy this week say, like, hey, when we find out somebody's bad, we get rid of them. Oh, really? Yeah. Really? Paxton is still in the race, and you got the guy in the White House. Like, so this is, I think, what plays into people's thinking when they hear, the tattoo and this and that. And by the way, just so I don't get hate mail, I said what I said about the tattoo as a Jew. Okay, so as a Jew, I was okay kind of writing that off as just, the act of a young, drunk, dumb soldier on leave. Okay. Mm-hmm. He was defending this country. He was fighting for this country. So I cut him slack. So I think it's important that I note that. But yeah, I mean, I agree with you on the Bernie thing. I remember the whole Hillary Clinton at the end of that campaign. I remember the debates, the finger pointing. Like, you're right. And I've interviewed MAGA people over the years. And I always asked them, like, if you didn't vote for Trump, who would you like to vote for? And often they say Bernie Sanders. And I'm like, what? Yeah. So first time I heard that, I thought it was nuts. But then they start explaining it. And it's like, the disruptor, the outsider, even though he's been in Congress forever, there's something about him that is a little Trumpy in that regard, where they like the flame throwing. They like the authenticity. I mean, there's a lot of good qualities to Bernie Sanders, don't get me wrong. But it's easy to understand the affinity and the parallels there. Emily, thank you so much for writing your story and coming on and talking about it. And good luck with everything.
Thank you so much.
All righty, take care. This episode was produced and edited by me, Andy Ostroy. It was co-produced by Matty Rosenberg and Jen Hammoud for Radio Free Rhiniecliff, with additional editing by Matty Rosenberg, music by Andrew Hollander, and graphic design by Cricket Lengyel. And with a special thanks to our sponsor, The Epicurean. Again, thanks for listening. Please rate and review wherever you get your podcasts, and subscribe to the Backroom with Andy Ostroy YouTube channel, where you can watch full videos of our interviews. See you next time.